There's a reason the name Machiavelli still makes people uncomfortable. He didn't invent cruelty. He just exposed it. Centuries ago, while others searched for virtue and truth, Niccolò Machiavelli sat quietly in the marble halls of Florence and watched the powerful lie, betray, and win. He saw kind men destroyed by honesty, loyal men erased by those they trusted, and gentle rulers torn apart by wolves wearing silk smiles. When his world collapsed, when the Medici family returned and stripped him of everything, branding him a traitor, torturing him, and exiling him from the very city he had served, Machiavelli didn't curse the world. E studied Italiano. In isolation, he began to write The Prince, not as a book of morality, but as an autopsy of human nature. He wasn't trying to make men evil. He was trying to make them untouchable, and in his observations, he uncovered 5 ruthless laws that could harden the human mind against manipulation, betrayal, and weakness. Because the truth is simple. The world doesn't reward purity, it rewards perception. The world doesn't protect the kind, it protects the cunning. So, before you dismiss Machiavelli as a cynic, understand this. He never told men to be cruel. He told them to see cruelty before it reached them. This is not a guide for tyrants. It's a guide for the ones who refuse to be their victims. Section 1. The Fall of the Naive Mind. Machiavelli learned his first lesson, not in books or philosophy, but in blood and silence. It began in Florence, at the turn of the 16th century, when Italy was a chessboard of shifting powers. Cities like Florence, Milan, Venice, and Rome devoured one another through schemes disguised as diplomacy. And at the center of this world, Machiavelli served as a diplomat, an observer of kings, popes, and soldiers. He believed at first that reason ruled men, that logic and honesty could persuade even the most ambitious leaders to act for the greater good. But then came the man who shattered that illusion. Cesare Borgia was the embodiment of controlled ruthlessness, elegant, charming, and terrifyingly intelligent. He didn't threaten people. He made them love him and fear him in the same breath. When Machiavelli met him, he said he had finally seen what real power looked like. Not the kind built on ideals, but on perception, timing, and human psychology. In one of the most infamous events Machiavelli witnessed, Borgia invited his most dangerous allies, men who had committed brutal acts in his name, to a friendly dinner. He praised their loyalty, toasted to their service, and smiled as the wine flowed. By morning, every single one of them was dead. Borgia didn't do it in rage. He did it to control the narrative of fear. And from that day, Machiavelli realized something few people ever understand. The most dangerous illusion in life is believing others think like you do. Good men project goodness. They assume honesty is universal. But the world is not filled with reflections of your character. It is filled with predators wearing masks of reason. This was Machiavelli's awakening. He began to see kindness as a strategy, not a default. He learned that people's morals were fluid, adjusted to suit their interests. And once you see that, innocence becomes a liability, he wrote later, almost like a warning to those who would still trust blindly. He who builds his power on the goodness of others builds on the wind. That line wasn't philosophy. It was experience, because Machiavelli had built his own life on that same illusion, serving Florence faithfully, trusting that his honesty would protect him. It didn't. When the Medici family returned to seize power, Machiavelli was accused of conspiracy. He was thrown in a dark cell, suspended by ropes, beaten, and interrogated for days. He had no secret to confess, no betrayal to admit. But in the world of power, truth doesn't matter as much as usefulness. He was tortured for being expendable, and when they were done, they threw him out of Florence, stripped of position, fortune, and dignity. But that exile gave birth to a mind sharper than pain. In the quiet of his countryside home, Machiavelli began to dissect humanity like a surgeon. He realized something that changed everything. Power is not in violence. It's in knowing when to use it. He watched how Borgia used cruelty strategically, not constantly, but deliberately. One act of decisive ruthlessness could achieve more stability than a lifetime of kindness that invited rebellion. To the modern mind, that sounds cold. To Machiavelli, it was simply truth observed. And this truth revealed his first psychological law, the foundation of becoming mentally untouchable. Law 1. Never confuse morality with survival. The world of human behavior operates on consequences, not intentions. You can be moral, but never naive. You can be kind, but not predictable, because predictability is the scent predators follow. Machiavelli wasn't preaching cruelty. He was preaching clarity. Clarity that the good can be destroyed if they don't understand the game they're in. And that was the beginning of his transformation, from servant of the state to philosopher of human survival. He no longer sought fairness. He sought understanding. He didn't want to win every battle. He wanted to never be destroyed by one, he wrote. Men should be either treated kindly or destroyed. For if they are only offended, they will seek revenge. But if destroyed, they can do nothing. Most people interpret this as savagery, but it's actually a psychological principle. Either reconcile fully or cut ties completely. Half measures of trust create whole disasters. In a way, Machiavelli discovered what modern psychology now calls cognitive dissonance. The mental conflict between what people want to believe about others and what is actually true. The naive mind tries to resolve that conflict with excuses. The untouchable mind resolves it with observation. So when he finally closed the first pages of The Prince, he wasn't writing for kings. He was writing for anyone who had ever been betrayed, broken, or underestimated. Anyone who wanted to understand why weakness attracts wolves. The first step toward power isn't aggression, it's awareness. And that is how Machiavelli became more than a thinker. He became a mirror to humanity. Hesed, hidden instincts. Because before you can control others, you must first conquer your own illusions. The streets of Florence whispered with betrayal. The same men who toasted to loyalty at dawn would orchestrate executions by dusk. Machiavelli stood among them not as a warrior or a nobleman, but as a student of deception. Every betrayal, every execution, every flicker of fear became data in his grand experiment on the human mind. From that chaos, he extracted 5 ruthless lessons, not of cruelty, but of control. Lessons that do not demand power over others, but mastery over oneself. These are not moral teachings. They are survival codes, blueprints for a mind that cannot be broken by manipulation, failure, or loss. Lesson uno menos ne eberarge. On the influence in the courts of Florence, truth was a weapon, and those who wielded it too loudly. Machiavelli realized that the moment you argue, you've already conceded power. The human mind resists correction. When you try to win an argument, you create resistance, a wall of pride that no truth can penetrate. The wise man, Machiavelli noted, never tries to prove he's right. He makes others want to believe he is. He told of Cesare Borgia, a man who never argued, never defended himself. When accused of cruelty, Cesare merely smiled, looked into his accuser's eyes, and said, "I do what is necessary." That single line disarmed more enemies than any speech could. The lesson: let others exhaust themselves proving a point. You don't need to fight for truth, only to make truth desirable. Psychologically, this is controlled through ego direction. You let the opponent believe they've chosen your idea on their own. Machiavelli called it the highest form of persuasion. Asterisk. The art of silent dominance. Asterisk. Lesson 2. Emotional distance is power to the untrained mind. Empathy feels like virtue. To Machiavelli, unchecked empathy was a liability. He watched as idealistic rulers, kind, emotional, loyal, were devoured by the same people they tried to protect. In politics, mercy unmeasured became weakness displayed. He concluded that emotional detachment was not cruelty, but clarity. He who wishes to be loved is already ruled. Machiavelli didn't advocate for coldness. He warned against emotional dependence. Once your happiness depends on someone else's approval, your mind becomes hostage to their mood. This law extends far beyond politics. In every negotiation, relationship, or betrayal, the mentally untouchable hold emotional distance. They feel everything, but are owned by nothing. This psychological stance is called controlled empathy. You understand emotion without letting it steer you. It's the same mindset used by great strategists and negotiators. Compassion without attachment. Observation without surrender. To rule the mind, you must sit on the throne above your emotions. Lesson 3. Build fear in silence. The most dangerous misconception of Machiavelli is that he promoted terror. He didn't. He promoted aura, the unspoken awareness that crossing you has consequences. When a prince constantly defends his power, ICM's whack. When a man never speaks of his strength, only shows it through composure, he becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is fear. Cesare Borgia was feared, not for his cruelty, but for his silence. His calm face in chaos made men hesitate because no one could measure him. Machiavelli learned that control is perception management. Fear, properly used, is not violence. It's the quiet suggestion of what might happen. Psychologically, it taps into the deepest human instinct. Uncertainty. The brain fears what it cannot predict. So the lesson is simple. Make your boundaries felt, not spoken. Make your limits visible without warning. When your silence carries meaning, your voice becomes law. Lesson 4. Never beg for respect. Created by absence. Machiavelli noticed a strange phenomenon. When a leader disappeared, his value multiplied. When he stayed too long, his authority dissolved into familiarity. In psychology, this is known as the contrast effect. Scarcity amplifies perception. When you're always available, your value decreases subconsciously in others' minds. That is why the most powerful rulers, and even artists or thinkers, vanished at the peak of their influence. They allowed absence to turn their image into legend. Machiavelli observed this in exile. The same men who mocked him when he was powerless began quoting him after he disappeared. Distance, he wrote, is the sculptor of reverence. The mentally untouchable apply this rule everywhere. Don't chase validation. Don't over-explain. Let silence raise your worth. Your withdrawal makes others question what they took for granted. And in that silence, respect is reborn. Lesson 5. Become the mirror, not the flame. Machiavelli's final lesson was the most subtle and the most dangerous. He discovered that those who revealed too much of their will, their anger, desire, or ambition, invite attack. But those who reflect others become unreadable. The mirror, he wrote, wins by showing nothing, but revealing all. In conversation, the mirror listens more than it speaks. In politics, it studies motives instead of confessing them. In psychology, it's known as strategic empathy, shaping perception by reflecting back what people want to see. Cesare Borgia was the perfect mirror. To the Pope, he was a devout son. To mercenaries, a loyal commander. To enemies, a charming diplomat. In truth, he was none of these, only what he needed to be. This doesn't mean deception for pleasure. It means adaptation for survival. The mentally untouchable reveal their true selves only in private. To the world, they are a reflection. Clear, calm, and unreadable. To master this is to escape judgment. You become immune to gossip, misunderstanding, and emotional warfare. You exist beyond the reach of manipulation, because no one can define what they cannot see. And so, from the shadows of Florence, these 5 lessons emerged, not as moral laws, but as mental armor. Machiavelli understood what few dared to admit. The world doesn't reward purity. It rewards perception, and those who see through illusion and refuse to be owned by it become untouchable. Section 3. The untouchable mind. This is where everything comes together. Not just Machiavelli's lessons, but how to live them without becoming cold, paranoid, or cruel. Florence, 1513. The city burns with whispers of power and betrayal. Behind the stone walls of his exile, Niccolò Machiavelli writes by candlelight, his hands still stained with ink and politics. He has lost everything, his position, his influence, his wealth, and yet, For the first time, he is free. Because when you've been stripped of everything, what remains is the one kingdom. No one can invade the mind. That night, as he writes the prince, he isn't writing a guide for rulers. He is writing a survival code, a blueprint for any soul who refuses to be destroyed by a treacherous world. That is the true meaning of mental untouchability. It's not about dominating others. It's about mastering your inner kingdom so completely that no betrayal, no failure, and no chaos can shake it. The art of inner sovereignty. The world Machiavelli lived in was ruthless alliances turned to ashes overnight. Promises were daggers hidden in smiles, but every betrayal became a lesson. External chaos means nothing if the inner state is calm. He observed that most people react emotionally, instinctively, and in doing so, they surrender control. But the untouchable mind responds, never reacts. Reaction is slavery. Response is sovereignty. He wrote that the most dangerous man is not the strongest, nor the rich, but the one who controls how he feels, when he feels it, and why he feels it. This is the foundation of every one of his laws. Don't argue, influence. Don't beg command through silence. Don't fear laws. Weaponize it. Don't show everything. Become the mirror. They all lead back to the same throne. Mastery of self. In the modern world, that means people will provoke you. Don't give them the reaction they expect. You will be misunderstood. Don't defend your image. Protect your peace. You will lose things, status, people, opportunities. Don't chase them. What's meant to test your strength, not define your worth. The moment you no longer need to be seen, you become truly visible. The discipline of controlled chaos. Machiavelli knew that peace cannot be constant. Every kingdom, internal or external, needs struggle to grow strong. He believed that challenge purifies the mind. Without resistance, intelligence decays into comfort. That's why the most mentally untouchable people do not avoid chaos. They study it. They move through it with purpose, like a strategist moving pieces across a board. In psychological terms, DC skadit, controlled exposure. You expose yourself to discomfort by choice, failure, solitude, criticism, until none of it controls you anymore. Machiavelli's life was exactly that. He endured humiliation, imprisonment, torture, and still turned his suffering into philosophy. He didn't deny pain, he converted it. On said that fortune favors the bold, but in truth, fortune favors the mentally prepared, those who have rehearsed pain in their minds long before it arrives. When your inner voice can calmly say, I've seen worse, you've already won. That's what mental invincibility looks like. Not arrogance, but inner readiness, balancing ruthlessness with humanity. Machiavelli has been called a devil, a cynic, a manipulator, but few understood the core of his philosophy. He never glorified cruelty. He analyzed it. He knew that true power without conscience collapses on itself. That S.Y. The final rule of being untouchable is not just mental control. It is moral clarity. Without naivety. He wrote of Cesare Borgia, not because he admired his brutality, but because he wanted to understand why it worked. He knew that darkness, when recognized and contained, becomes wisdom. To be mentally untouchable is to know your capacity for ruthlessness and choose discipline over destruction. It's to hold both mercy and control in the same hand, and know exactly when to use each. As Idoleward, the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must be both. This is the paradox of the strong mind. You must be cunning without cruelty, firm without arrogance, and cold without losing compassion. Your emotions are tools, not masters. Your fear is information, not destiny. Your past is a teacher, not a prison. The final law. Indifference is freedom. By the time Machiavelli finished The Prince, he was a man society had already buried. But in that solitude, he unlocked the most powerful truth of all. He who depends on nothing fears nothing. When you no longer depend on approval, you become free from humiliation. When you no longer depend on outcome, you become immune to failure. When you no longer depend on others' understanding, your peace becomes unshakable. That is the untouchable mind, not heartless, but liberated. In a world driven by noise, manipulation, and emotional warfare, the one who can stand silent, thinking clearly while others panic, becomes unstoppable. When dawn broke over Florence, Machiavelli put down his pen. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't rich. He wasn't worshipped. But he understood something most rulers never did. You can lose your crown, your allies, your freedom, but if you never lose control of your own thoughts, you remain a king. Centuries later, his name still echoes, not because of wealth or war, but because he mastered the one battlefield that never changes, the human mind. The world belongs not to the loud, but to the lucid, not to the ruthless, but to the disciplined, and not to those who seek control, but to those who no longer need it. That is the legacy of Machiavelli. That is the code of the mentally untouchable.